Great. All right. Thank you again for joining everybody. My name is Danielle Coco. I'm the Marketing and Communications Director at SESTA. We are excited to hear from Zircom International, our consultant based in Africa. They are going to be presenting on North Africa today. So this is the last of a 5 days webinar on the continent of Africa. We started, first one was, more of a general entire continent webinar that covered quite a lot of ground. And then we moved from South Africa, East Africa, West Africa. And here we are covering the north from Casablanca to Cairo. So without further ado, I will invite Richard to share his screen and get started.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Danielle. And we also have some people that are in the audience that are presenting with us.
Great. Who is?
So, hello?
Oh, sorry. You're not saying attendees. Sorry. Okay. I thought maybe I had to move somebody into a panelist. All right.
Sandra Maddie should be able to speak. And I'm wondering if Salma has joined us as well. Let me start sharing. Okay. Danielle, are you able to move Sandra Maddie to panel?
I don't see her in the attendee list. There are two
She
Richard
says she's,
Zervas. I see
yeah.
there are two Richards in the panelist. Would
Um,
she be under your
who
name?
is the Richard? Who's the Richard that is muted? That's
I don't know.
unusual.
Yeah, I said ask to unmute on that.
Okay. Sandra. Okay, perfect. Sandra's calling from Egypt, and I'm wondering if Salma is also there. Is there a Salma on the list?
No, I don't see
Okay,
her yet.
that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so uh, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're seated right now. I'm calling from South Africa, and we have Belil from Tunisia and Sandra from Egypt today. And we're going to be talking to you about getting access to North Africa, some of the key markets. We're actually running a large trade mission from the USA in Casablanca today, and so our Morocco staff are actually very occupied with a number of American companies there. And so we have a very busy team in North Africa, a lot of things happening, and we're going to be telling you a lot about some of the market. So we're grateful that everybody's joined us today, and we're looking forward to discussing some of the action points with you in terms of how American exporters can reach the market. So if you look very quickly at where the staff are located, we have people across the, the northern part of Africa in Morocco and Tunisia and Egypt, and we've been doing projects in North Africa for a long number of years and representing American companies in Africa since 1999. So we have a very good experienced team, and we're looking forward to telling you more about Africa in terms of how you can access it. So again, very quickly, I love to show this slide because it really tells a lot about what's happening. So presently, Africa's got almost 1.5 billion people in it, and it has surpassed China. It's surpassed India as the largest regional bloc. It's a common market right now. And by the end of this century, Africa will have over 40% of the world's population. And when we talk about agriculture, food and beverages, we're talking about the mouths to feed. And when you talk about can they afford what we're selling, Africans are becoming more affluent. And so we are becoming a market that is more and more tuned to the kinds of tastes that Americans enjoy, and they're able to afford it more and more. Presently, Africa's got almost 20% of the world's population, so 1 out of every 5 people are African. And by the end of the century, as I indicated, 2 out of every 5 will be African. So quite a lot is happening. So this is the market region that we'll be discussing. And if we're looking at the Maghreb countries, we often like to include Mauritania because it's got very close logistic ties into Morocco. And so there's a lot to be said for this region, but this region has the relative largest trade with the United States, the most long-standing trade in Africa with the United States. In terms of diplomatic recognition, Morocco was one of the very first countries that recognized the United States right after the Treaty of Paris, which closed the American Revolution. And so there's a lot to be said for a long-standing history with the region for America and a long-standing trading relationship, particularly with the Morocco and Algeria and Tunisia region of the market. So there's a really good tale to be said about American business in this region, and we'd like to uh, get you right caught up to date with what's happening right now. So we look at the market in general, and we see that they're bringing in about $2.2 billion of agricultural imports from the United States into the region. And if we're looking at sub-Saharan Africa, which is below that region, everything below those countries, it's 2.1 billion. So North Africa, of the total amount of trade for American exporters to Africa, the North African countries that we're talking about actually have the majority of the export figures that go into Africa. So if you look at Africa as a continent, it looks like a big continent, but these countries that we're focusing on have more than 50% of the export trade that comes from the United States. They import most of what is coming into Africa right now. Now we're looking at this trend and we're seeing that the sub-Saharan portion will eventually catch up, probably within another 2 or 3 years. But right now, this is, and it will still continue to be a very important market for American exporters. Just very quickly, the market is relatively large. It's almost, in terms of population, it's almost as big as the United States, and we can see that the population breakdown has Egypt as the very largest market by population by a big margin. Then we have Sudan, Algeria, Morocco. Interestingly, Morocco has a relatively high standard of living compared to the other ones. So, in terms of its import figures, it's also very strong. But we see that by 2050, there's going to be another 100 million people in the region, and that's mostly through the natural birth rate. But what's interesting is we'll see a peak after 2050, and then we'll probably see the population coming down a little bit, simply because the replacement rate in these countries is much lower than the rest of Africa. So we're seeing that the average for Africa is going to continue to grow, but for North Africa, we're already seeing that it's reached its demographic peak around in another 25 years. And so then we'll see a slight decline. But given 25 years, a lot of us will be retired by then. And so we don't have to really worry too much. But during that period of time, we're starting to see the region going from a very young population to one that is more middle-aged and will be more like we see in Europe or other markets where there are older populations in general. But what is important is that right now it is a very young population and one that is uh, growing. And what is also very good to spot.
Oh, Richard, did we lose you? Uh-oh.
Can you hear
Richard.
me, Sandra?
Oh, there you are.
Oh, you got me. Was I talking to nobody for a while?
Just for about 1 minute.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
That's
Okay.
okay.
Um, so um, we're looking at very strong growth. In terms of real terms, it's just over 3%, almost 3.5%. And we've got a very good real growth rate in the region. So it's a very strong indicator of a growing market, which is very good. So again, here's another quick infographic of the region and the growth that we're seeing across North Africa. So we can see that it's a strong market. It's pulling in a lot of American exports. But what is interesting is that not all of these markets are the same, and we have to differentiate them. And although they're all part of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is a common market, they are still very, very differentiated country markets, and it's important to discuss each of them a little bit individually. So the first thing is, I'd like maybe Sandra, if you could give us some comments about Egypt, which is one of America's largest general exporter markets in Africa, and even it's one of the top markets actually in the region of Africa and the Middle East. So, Sandra, maybe if you could talk about some of um, the insights that you would have relating to American and Egyptians' tastes coinciding, and perhaps maybe a bit about getting your product into market in Egypt.
Hello, everybody. Well, from our experience with American products so far in the market, we've noticed that the products with highest export potential into the Egyptian market are agricultural products. So we're talking about grains, pulses, meat, dairy, these kind of products. And also ingredients, food ingredients, because the food processing sector in Egypt is huge and strengthening. And it's strengthening because we had a very steep currency devaluation the recent couple of years. So the food processing sector is strengthening. These days, like I think the rest of the world, the purchasing power is not as high as before. What else can I tell you about American products? There is a big competition with European products here because we have a free trade agreement with Europe, but not with the States. So the products have to be different than the ones that come in from Europe.
Mm-hmm. And tell us a bit about some of the regulatory issues relating to bringing food in.
They're very strict in terms of the Food and Safety Authority. And sometimes if you're talking about grains and pulses, so we add to that the quarantine authorities. But usually this is the job of the importer. The ones we've talked to in the past, they always are confident that they can deal with these sort of restrictions. Yes, that's all.
Okay. And Egypt has the largest non-Islamic population in the region. Does this make a difference in terms of halal products or things that would be different in terms of the other markets that are some of the other ones we're going to focus on in the presentation today?
Every product still needs to be halal, otherwise it will not enter the Egyptian market. That's for sure, regardless of the non-Muslim minorities. Everybody eats the same meat. There are some pork products in Egypt, but that's a different story. So it doesn't, when it comes to regulations, they're one type of regulations.
Okay. Okay, thanks. And how does Egypt see itself in the coming years relating to um, potential trade agreements with the USA? I know that some of the other African countries have been very focused on getting a little bit closer to America in the last years. Is Egypt, does it consider itself neutral, or does it have any directions toward working toward freer trade with the United States at all?
Don't know anything about that, honestly, but I know that we are going through very strong policy and economic reform. That's hence the free flotation of the currency. So, and because we are also externally, for the lack of better word, forced to cooperate more and open the market more. So I think we have to.
Thanks, Sandra.
So,
So we're gonna go to the next portion, and I'll tell you that Morocco is a country that has come into wide acclaim with American exporters because it is the first country that has a free trade agreement with the United States. And as you can see with the figures, the trade with the export trade to the United States has gone up about 7 or 8 times since they opened the free trade agreement, which is good news. And the U.S. has a very large trade surplus with Morocco. So where America can trade freely, America does a good job, and America is a strong exporter. And when there's a level playing field, America can be very successful, even in places that are a little bit more cost conscious. And we were talking about um, grains and pulses in Egypt. There's a company that was on they're with the trade mission that we're working on today, and they work with pulses and lentils, and they actually during the trade mission at a first time meeting made a very large sale. So we're quite happy about that. And so we see that right across the North African markets, there is a good market for intermediate goods that are maybe not grown in these arid countries, which is quite interesting. Interestingly enough, we call them arid countries, but there is some elements of climate change. And I don't know if you've watched the news, but Morocco had a rainfall just a few weeks ago that was larger than some of the entire annual rainfall. And so there were regions of the desert that had about 8 or 10 inches of rain all in the course of 48 hours. And so we might be looking at different weather patterns shifting and things that might be greening parts of the Sahara. We're not sure, but we've got things that are happening globally. We have to keep watch of these things. But generally, what is also very interesting is that as the world uh, climate alters and we're seeing things get a little bit warmer, we're seeing some shifts, and it looks like there's going to be generally more rainfall across most of Africa. And so what could be happening is that the over the many decades that we're going to be experiencing this, we could be seeing a lot of areas getting greener and being able to sustain crops, which is a good thing because we've got a bigger population. So this is something that a lot of people are studying right now, of course, and we're looking at Africa presently having 60% of the world's available arable land that is not under cultivation right now. So, as this land becomes available for cultivation and the population is growing, that's a good thing. But that doesn't mean that there's not going to be a big market for American exports as we go along. So, interestingly, we have a very strong market in Morocco, free trade agreement with the United States, which gives access to a lot of things that are not under free trade or duty-free access into the other countries. And so Morocco, with a generally a smaller population than Egypt, if you remember the statistics, it's about 38 million people. It will continue to be a strong American partner, and it will continue to grow with its export sector. Then we'll move on to Tunisia, and I'm going to let Belil talk about the region. And maybe Belil, if you could talk about some of the taste factors that are contributing to changes in Tunisia, and what's going on in the food and beverage market there right now? What do you see? Are there more grocery stores? Maybe just a few comments about the market right now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Richard, for this presentation. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. As Richard mentioned, so the cultural acceptance of American brands, especially, and talking about American culture, especially through movies, music, especially, and fast food, is widely recognized here in Tunisia and admired by youth. Mentioning that 60% of population here are youth. As a result, so the American food and beverage brands are often perceived as trendy and high quality. This cultural affinity helps the American brands, in fact, find welcoming market here in Tunisia across or especially among youth and middle class consumers. One of the other factors I would like to talk about the Tunisia location. That Tunisia location is not in North Africa, provides a good gateway to both European and African markets. And it's proximity to Europe that coupled with its active participation in international trade agreements, which makes Tunisia an attractive entry point for American brands as too. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Bilal. And tell me about the population there. Is it generally younger people, and are they driving a lot of the new change? Are they and maybe a bit about is internet purchases of food, like we're seeing here in South Africa, we can buy groceries online. We have several delivery companies that will bring food to you from different restaurants, for example. Tell us a bit about how food is purchased there, particularly among young people.
Yes. In fact, e-commerce, the retail landscape here in Tunisia evolving with the expansion of modern supermarkets, hypermarkets also, and especially stores, which increasingly stock imported products through e-commerce is also growing in popularity. So it's offering a new adventure for American food and European food as also too. So beverage brands and let's say beverage food snacks and any kind of cocktails, and especially we are talking about halal food here and Islamic food are very welcomed and in highly demand.
Mhm. And I know that you're also involved with other Maghreb countries. Tell us about the ability of people to speak English in business meetings, and what are the predominant languages in the region?
Okay, beside the native language, which is Arabic and Tunisian dialect, French is the second language, especially among older people. But the English becomes more and more very interesting language here, especially in the last 5 years. And youth, generally, youth speak and use English language in a daily basis. And also in the business meetings and any fields, other fields to this
Hmm.
language. Yeah.
So if I'm an American business exporter coming into Tunisia or Morocco, for example, the generally speaking, if the person is younger, there's a higher probability they'll speak English.
Yes, yes, of course. I confirm that.
Okay, very good. Um, okay, well, thanks very much for that. And I'd just like to point out that Algeria is also a very important market, although unlike Morocco, it does not have the close diplomatic proximity to the United States, but it is a very big, important market, relatively speaking. and it is one that has a very close shared history with France. So there's a lot of people from Algeria living in France. There used to be almost 1 million French people living in Algeria, and they all left during the period prior to Algerian independence, or most of them did. So it is a close market to Europe. And if we remember the map, there's a very close proximity to Europe. So a lot of these countries have a very strong economic tie to the European continent. And as Sandra indicated, the Egyptian market has a free trade agreement with the European Union. So that does put American companies at a relative disadvantage. So when you're looking at bringing things in, you're going to be looking at a relatively bigger price differentiation, and you're going to have to be aware that your product differentiation is going to be of key importance unless you're bringing in something that is closer to a commodity or an ingredient typically. So um, I'd like to maybe have a quick discussion about the cold storage chain in North Africa. Generally, it's world class. And we are working very closely with a company in Morocco that does focus on cold chain logistics. And so we're very knowledgeable about that. And we have, as you can see from the infographic here, the northern part of Africa has a relatively strong electrification in residential homes, and this is reflected in electrification right across all the different industries, but particularly ports, logistics, and trucking, and all of the different warehousing requirements. So if you're looking at cold chain logistics, North Africa is usually not a problem. Where the rest of Africa, we always have to really investigate whether we can get something in or not. And certain markets might potentially be excluded, although we're seeing improvements in cold chain logistics. Typically, North Africa is not an issue, which is generally a good thing. I know that maybe if Sandra could make a comment about the some of the logistics. We had a sweet potato trade mission to Egypt a number of months ago, and they looked into some of the logistics and discussed that with the Egyptian some of the Egyptian market leaders. If you're Sandra, could you maybe make a comment about the cold chain logistics system in Egypt for us? Thanks.
The cold chain logistics here is very advanced. So cold storage, reefers, all that is very well in place. It's very mature market for it.
Mhm.
Otherwise, in terms of logistics, of course, there is the shipping time, the transit time, usually is between 60 to 70 days from the States to Egypt.
Mhm. And we've seen a lot of highways being built right across the region. Are we seeing the same thing in Egypt in terms of getting product speedily to secondary cities?
Yes, this has been a priority for the current government. The linkages, the road linkages between cities, and there was a lot of budget put into that, and they've succeeded to build quite a road network and upgrade it really in an amazing way in the past years.
Mhm.
Trains, speed trains, also roads for trucks. Everything is in place for trading activities, wide trading activities.
Okay, perfect. So maybe if we're an American person and we're sitting in one of our states in the SUSTA region, um, we can feel pretty secure that this region is really, really fairly modern and up to date with most aspects of getting product to market.
Yes, for sure. The market is very developed in this sense. Yes,
Okay, well, thank you.
you're welcome.
Just very quickly, maybe if Bilal, if you could give us some comments about the regional trade within the Arab Maghreb Union and how the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is being viewed there right now.
Yeah, of course. If we are talking about the logistics in this area, it's highly developed and with multiple ports. Also, these five countries, they speak the same language, and culturally they are very approach, and there is high trading missions between these countries, especially if we are talking about Tunisia. Through Tunisia, we can have access to the Algerian and the Libyan market easily because we have trade agreements with two of these markets, combining more than 50 million people. 70% of them are youth, and they are highly welcoming the American goods, food, and beverage specifically. Even the Moroccan and Algerian situation is a bit there is a kind of a conflict, but it's not in the real sense of conflict, but relations and specifically economic relations and trading relations still going on in a good way. Yeah, that's all. And I'm open to answer any question. Please feel free to reach out.
Okay, great. So we'll have time for questions at the end of the presentation. And maybe Sandra, if you could talk to us a bit about Libya. Libya is broken into two halves right now under two different governments. Is it possible to make sales into that country right now?
It is possible. There is the part where Tripoli is the head, let's say the capital, and the other half where Bani Ghazi, is it in English, Bani Ghazi? That is the capital. And you cannot do business with both at the same time. You have to have your contracts here and there. So they're really separate. They're almost like two countries, almost.
Mhm.
They have a particular way of doing business. It might be a bit strange for the West because it's all based on who you know, and there are every sector has usually key players that without them you cannot enter the sector, and not everything is done in a very strict professional manner. In a way, there is a lot of under the table money sometimes that people pay and things like that happening in Libya, but it is a huge market. Not huge, but it's a very growing market. There is a great potential there, and the Egyptian manufacturers I know are doing a lot of business there, and Turkish manufacturers as well export a lot there. So there is a lot of trade happening there.
Mm-hmm. And so, if you know the history of the region, Libya had a civil war, and it really hasn't coalesced back into a single unitary governing state. And so, this is something that when you look at the map, you're going to see the country of Libya. But in terms of function, you're going to have to understand that it's broken up a little bit. And often the best way to get into Libya is to be active with a Tunisian company or a company out of Egypt that's already active in the market. Interestingly enough, the country of Malta, which is a European Union member, has companies that go in there regularly and do representative sales in the region and have good networking. So there are ways to reach that market, but you have to do it through a conduit that we would help you to recommend that would be a little bit safer than if you were to just go in yourself. Um, so we do have to say that the region is part of the African Continental Free Trade Area, and so the Maghreb Union and other parts of the region are coalescing with the rest of Africa into a common market. And we already see that Egypt is a very strong market leader in Africa, and they're focusing a lot of their diplomacy on becoming one of Africa's key leading countries. We also see that Morocco is positioning itself as a gateway into the rest of Africa. We're seeing that South Africa is, although very strongly rooted, its strengths are in Southern Africa, covering about 15 countries in the southern cone of Africa. So a lot of these countries function as gateways or are looking at becoming regional powerhouses and working with other smaller countries to kind of coalesce a market. And when we look at the African market, we always have to be sure to pick a region and understand how the logistics, the cold chains, if you need that, how the transport works, because a good country can often get you into another half dozen countries. It's not as though when you pick a country, you're only going to be doing business in that country. A good question to always ask is, are you involved with other countries and can you get us involved in other countries? And quite often in Africa, they won't want to say, oh, no, we can't do anything for you. They'll always say yes, but they might be hedging that a little bit. So it's up to you to do your due diligence. And that's what we're here for, to help you with understanding what the companies do, what they want, where their coverage is, and if they're able to do something bigger than the country that they're located in. Are they, how are they situated with offices, distribution facilities, warehousing, all of these things in the different countries that they're working in. So very quickly, we've seen that almost ratified the agreement. It's been in close to uh, I think that you can see that Libya has not, and that's simply because they're a relatively dysfunctional. Sudan is in a civil war that isn't really touching Egypt at all in terms of its economy, but it's something that is happening right now. So we just tell people not to be interested in Sudan right now as well. But you can see that all of the other countries have ratified it, and it's been a functional grouping since 2021. It's the largest common market by geography. It's the largest common market by numbers of countries, and it's the largest common market in the world by population now. So the African Continental Free Trade Area is an important aspect for American exporters to get their heads around. And as this develops, it's going to become something along the lines of a European Union model, although we know that Europe took several decades to get where it is now. We're going to see the same thing happening with Africa. They're discussing a lot of the protocols, but as a food and beverage provider, a lot of your firms are going to understand that you may not have to understand 54 different countries. You may just have to understand a common protocol toward, for example, phytosanitary requirements or labeling or different types of regulatory models that we're bringing in. And so we're seeing these things develop. We're looking at a horizon of several years before they become ratified and then enforced. So but we are looking at a gradual movement toward a functional common market here, with a lot of strong participants who are very much encouraging all the different participants to adhere to the different protocols that are part of the common market and to make sure that this is working. The world is shifting very quickly, as you all understand. You're watching the news. I'm sure you're seeing things move. And when the world moves quickly, if we have cohesion with our neighbors, it makes a lot more sense and brings a lot of stability to our own trading behavior. And when we have a common market here in Africa, that helps to stabilize things in Africa and amongst our trade with other countries. So it's a big thing, and it's going to be encompassing the North African markets. But as North Africa is bringing in, like I said at the very beginning of the presentation, more than half of the American products, it is important to understand that it is also coalescing with this important grouping. So if we look in summary, we have very good, fast economic growth in the region, which is an enticement for American exporters. We've got market demand that is being driven by interest from online sources, and we're seeing American brands and tastes being introduced. And if you go through any of the major cities in Morocco or Egypt, for example, and you're looking at the restaurant names, what do you see, Sandra?
Well, you see here in Egypt, the American fast food chains, they're doing very well, and they have been for many, many years. And when it comes to brands and tastes, as Bilal had mentioned, the American pop culture plays a great role, whether it is watching Friends, the show, and all the youth really wanting to have that coffee that Rachel holds.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of stuff really impacts a lot the consumption patterns of food. Um, and like you asked about English, English is very widely spoken. The demographics are a young population, um, and uh, and it's fashionable to be more westernized, whether it is in your dress code or what you're eating,
Mm-hmm.
what you're listening, what you're watching, everything. So
Well,
that's a trend. Yes.
thanks, Sandra.
You're
So
welcome.
we have a youth-driven demographic, which is really friendly to America. Youth-driven business culture. As we can see, there's a difference when you're working with a younger company rather than older people typically. Older people typically are a little more reserved, very tied to working within established elites. Young people aren't so concerned about that. They're very excited about new ideas. They're very merit-driven. And then we see that there's a very big aspect that's tied to the youth culture, which is a creative entrepreneurial Arabic business culture. And that is something that if you tie that with the youth culture, you're going to get a very important aspect of what's happening in these countries. Keep in mind that this is part of the largest common market in the world, which is presently developing. And we're looking at the growth of English, and hopefully it will grow quickly enough that by the time you get there, you won't need a translator. But I think right now, Bilal, if you went into Tunisia, would a typical American company need a translator to get around in meetings?
So typically, or generally speaking, no, they do not need a translator, especially if they are having trade mission with younger entrepreneurs here or distributors or retailers. They will find it easily for communication in English language.
And what we're finding with our trade mission that's ongoing in Morocco right now, translators are helpful in about half of the meetings. So the other half of meetings, the people can speak fluent English. There's no problem. A translator might be useful because there might maybe one or two of the people in the company could speak good English, but they might want to bring in a good number of managers to discuss with the American company, and some of those people may not speak English 100%. Egypt is a country with a closer relationship historically to Britain, and is English spoken a lot in Egypt relative to the business culture, Sandra?
Yes, I mean it's normal to find two Egyptians sending emails to each other for work and speaking only in English. I mean writing only in English, and the language has is almost an integral part of the business language here. Also at the youth level, I mean the American English is youth like to integrate English into their everyday speaking, and it's very widely spoken. We never had in the past actually 20 years of doing this. We've never had to resort to a translator in Egypt.
Okay. And I would say that, we're talking about food and beverages, and from our SUSTA friends, we know that there's a lot of very good alcoholic beverages. But I would say that before you start investigating North Africa, start looking at what the regulatory environment looks like. Seriously look at whether there is a market for your product. I will tell you that it is not easy to get samples into North Africa, for example, if you're trying to send them, and, and that's simply because of uh, the ties to Islam and um, their dislike of alcohol. So you do have to be very careful with that. There are um, locations that do sell alcohol in limited quantities in every one of these countries, but they would not be considered easy markets to enter. And there are um, a lot of tariff barriers, there's a lot of regulatory barriers, so they don't make it easy for importation of any kind of alcoholic beverages in the market. And that's something that ties in with the market dynamics. And maybe if you're selling alcoholic beverages, look to sub-Saharan Africa, because that's a market that's open to you and a place where there are no issues with bringing in samples and that kind of thing. Am I telling the truth, Sandra?
Well, I like because we just were midway in a project that involved Californian wine. So what I discovered about this is there is very high alcohol consumption in Egypt. So I don't know whether it is the Islamic thing or the protecting the local industry. We have two huge wine and spirit and beer
Mhm.
factories or manufacturing entities in Egypt, local. One of them is owned by Heineken. So it might be also that they're protecting the local industry. So I'm
Right.
not sure
And
which.
and what did you find the tariff levels on alcoholic beverages were?
Yes, I'm saying they're protecting the industry because
Yeah.
they're at 3,000 to 4,000% the customs.
Yeah.
So they're making it basically impossible unless you're traveling, and then you, as an Egyptian, you'd be allowed 1 liter in tax free, and if you're a foreigner entering the country, you're allowed up to 3 liters per trip. And they recently in the last 6 months added it's free tax, but then for each bottle you have to pay $13 extra,
Hmm.
regardless of what
Yeah.
kind of you're getting, whether it's a $7 or a $700 bottle.
So as we were discussing this with Sandra, I'd never ever heard of a 3,000% tariff barrier on anything in any country for any purpose. So that was a big shock to me. But take that for what it's worth. And there are good markets out there for American beverages, but you do have to consider carefully looking at any country in North Africa before you put your resources into it. So as we always do, the slides are available for you, and we have a country slide for each of the markets with up-to-date statistics, as up-to-date as they can possibly be. And we'll leave that for Danielle to distribute to any of you who ask for them. So these are available. And I'm just going to stop sharing right now. But are there any questions that we have from the audience, we can discuss them. And remember, we are here to help you to make those sales. We really want you to explore the markets, to get into the markets, to get excited about travel, to be confident that you're in good hands with the SUSTA professional team that exists in many global markets. And we're just one of the team that you can have access to. We're here to sort out as much of the nonsense as possible for you. We want you to get close to those sales, and we want to put you in touch with the best buyers possible that are interested in your product lines in the markets that we are covering across Africa. So I'll let Danielle moderate for the rest of the discussion and maybe take some questions.
Sure. Great. Yes, we have two questions that came through the Q&A. The first one is, what are common USA products that are attractive to younger retailers or distributors in the
Can
Sandra,
take
could you,
this.
or Belil? Yes,
Yeah,
thanks, Belil.
I can take this question. So, most of the highly demanded food products, including American food, are snacks, soft drinks, sauces, and ready-to-eat meals. These are the highly demanded products, alongside with the healthy food, bio food, because the health consciousness is increasing here, especially in Tunisia and in North Africa in general. So you may be considering these products as the highly demanded products.
Sandra, do you have any comments?
Yeah, when it comes to Egypt, I think the picture is a bit different. The potential for FMCG food is not very high, but it is high in the categories of pulses and grains and meat, uh, um, and some dairy, um, and beans and corn, and along these lines. And also the intermediate products, food products and ingredients, B2B. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, what should producers be wary of when exporting to Morocco? Are there any threats or challenges?
I think it's interesting to understand that um, it's not a threat, nor is it a particular challenge, but get to know the Arabic culture a little bit. It's important to understand that in America, a yes is a hard yes, and a no is a hard no. But in Arabic cultures, there's a lot of in-between territory. And it's important when you do go to Morocco that, and this is something that our team works with between our African, South African, our West African people that go there, East African people that go there, even the other cultures of Africa, which are very, what would be the word, very differential. They find another level of differential behavior in the Arab cultures and in Morocco, for example. So it's good to understand when they're nuancing a yes or a no, and so that you don't get caught misunderstanding. And so I would ask that if you're before you really try cracking the market, go online, find some good articles to read about business communication in Morocco, um, and or any of the other countries. There's some very good books relating to cultural requirements when you're traveling. Get to know some Arabic words of greeting. That's going to get you very far. Um, and you know, other things, generally, Americans have a good welcome in Morocco. I would also say that if you're looking at a very positive things. American business is viewed relatively positively in Morocco, and that is not a so the relative view of the United States in that country is a positive in general, uh, particularly amongst the business people there. Um, those are two things. Maybe one that is one for you to work through a little bit. The other one is something to look forward to. And again, what we're finding is that English is being spoken a lot more, and particularly amongst people under 30, which is really helpful and interesting. And it's very different than 20 years ago.
Yeah, that seems like that makes it a good time also to get, a foot in the door while it is still, things are still kind of new.
Yep.
Does anybody else have questions? Oh, I see a hand up. Ed, I'm going to unmute you so you can just ask your. Or it says ask.
Yes, this is Ted. Thank you. The question that I have is I heard that snacks, a health product, is in demand, especially in North Africa. What are the challenges with the price point? Healthy snacks in the United States are expensive to produce, and there are people that have the purchasing power to buy them. If we look into providing this product into this region, are we going to be encountered with the purchasing power issues, or do you see a portion of the market that has that purchasing power, and how do you go about it?
Yeah. So the one thing about this whole region is that it's more advanced than the rest of Africa, and so we've seen the rise of formal grocery stores, and where you have that, you tend to have more snack foods being sold. So in general, the structure is there, and people are affording, more products, a better differentiated product than they could over the previous decades. So there's growth there. I would look at, particularly for your product, what the tariff level would be. I'm assuming it would be lowest in Morocco. Um, I would also indicate that Morocco is a very big producer of all kinds of food, and snack food is one that they do excel in, and they sell and export to Europe. So know that they do that, but where your product will be strongest is in differentiation. So if you're selling something that is more along the lines of closer to a health food than a common biscuit, um, you're going to be better off. But uh, once more, I'd like to maybe just intimate that a little bit of market research might be helpful before you take the leap in, and that's what we're here for. We want
Okay.
to help you to garner your resources for where they can be best used. If you're interested in a market, we'd be glad to help you out before you jump in entirely.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Ted.
And I'm going to share my screen really quickly while we have a few more minutes, just to show everybody. Can you see that? I'm on the SESTA website. So if you want to meet with the team at Zircom individually on Zoom or Teams, you can go to our events page and click on Export Education right here. And you can scroll down to Africa Virtual Consultations and schedule time to meet with these folks, 30 minutes, and then you can really discuss some things that pertain specifically to your company or your product, identify a market, that kind of. So I just want to make sure everybody knows those exist. They're free. You just have to, register and then work with the team to schedule. And one other plug is all of our consultants, so but also all of the other consultants from India, China, Hong Kong, Canada, Europe, Caribbean, and Central America, Mexico, and South America are all traveling to the United States in December, in just a few weeks, for SUSTA's meeting in Clearwater, Florida. So once a year, we bring everybody together to meet and make plans for the year ahead. And we ask all of our consultants to come in a day early, and we host a seminar for all of you, for our exporters who are SUSTA participants. So we are hosting that on December 9th in Clearwater, Florida. If you're interested, you can, again, it's on the export education page, just head there. And it's a great time to meet with all of our consultants in person, hear from them about their respective markets, and you can even meet one-on-one with them that day as well in person. So just wanted to plug that in case you hadn't seen it yet.
We'll be having Cephas from Ghana and Faith from Kenya visiting, and they can speak for the entire continent. But they'll be coming from both ends, East and West Africa, and looking forward to meeting you if you're able to come down to the meetings.
Yeah, great, great. We're really excited about that. Okay, I don't see any other questions or chats. And it is right on time, 10 o'clock. So thank you all so much, Sandra, Bilal, and Richard. We really appreciate your time this morning and sharing all of this and interesting information on North Africa and the nuances between each country. So thank you for sharing all of that with me.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye
Bye.
now.
Bye-bye.